Hello, welcome to the Alone Show. I'm your host, John Malone, and in this episode, I've brought on Eric Taylor. And as for our guest, he's from Phoenix, Arizona. He is the host of The Hidden Gateway and has published a memoir late last year titled In the Eye of the Father, a memoir of faith and redemption. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jesston Williams.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Greatly appreciate it.
Anytime. So,
Anytime.
how's life?
Life is excellent. I've been busy. I stay busy, that's for sure. As you mentioned, I have my podcast, the Hidden Gateway Podcast, which I've been doing now since December of 2020. And obviously, released my memoir, or was published, I should say, in November of last year, 2021. So between promoting my book, various interviews and book chats at local libraries and bookstores, and weekly podcast, I stay very, very busy. But life is excellent. Doing exactly what I want to do, and that keeps me happy.
Great.
Yeah,
Have
that's
you
great to hear.
Absolutely. Have you been up too much recently?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Have you been up too much recently?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, just promoting my book and doing my podcast, and just to get into my book a bit, In the Eye of the Father, a memoir of faith and redemption. It's something that was much needed for me to be able to express myself. I have definitely been on a journey my entire life, but my journey took a turn, if you will, when I lived in San Diego, and this was in 2014. I had some things going on in my personal life, and I remember coming home from work one day after a long, hectic day at work. I went up into my room, sat on my bed, closed my door, and I just asked God for truth, right? And I heard a voice, audible, just like you and I are talking. And this voice said, "Nothing is as it seems." So um, after hearing that, I was led on this journey of discovering truth about about life, and more importantly, self. And what I came to learn was that the first step of understanding who I was to become came at the death of who I was. So I've been through this rebirth, if you will, and my life was very interesting growing up in regards to my father, who raised me along with my mother. My father was a Marine, but he was also an alcoholic. So he had a lot of things that he dealt with in his life, a lot of built up toxic negative energy, and he didn't know how to deal with that. So during that time in my youth, a lot of his aggression, a lot of that negative energy came out in the form of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, as well as a lot of verbal and psychological abuse. And that caused me to grow up not knowing or wanting to express myself, right? My brother and I, we used to literally get beat up, which seemed like weekly. And again, like I said, a lot of verbal abuse. And looking back on it, it seems like I would have preferred to take the physical abuse over the verbal abuse, because the verbal and psychological abuse is really what stuck for a long time, that caused me to have a lot of issues throughout my life. See, his mantra was, a child is to be seen and not heard. So again, that developed me to have a lot of communication issues and expression issues, and for me to be able to start a podcast and write a book, it's truly been life changing for me.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear. I'm sorry to hear that. And
Yeah.
Oh, you know,
we really appreciate you expressing yourself to us. We do.
Yeah, I really appreciate
yeah,
it.
absolutely. And no need to be sorry. The way I look at it, everything uh, that has happened to me in life was supposed to happen, and it's definitely made me who I am today. I wouldn't be doing the things I do now if it wasn't for what I've been through. And my book, I look at it as a template to be able to help others that have gone through or may be currently going through some of, or I should say, similar experiences. So I had to go through those things in order to be a light to the world, if you will, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, I see what you're saying.
So, tell me more about what you do on your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is it's quite enjoyable. I must say, what I do is I you know cover a wide variety of topics, right? Just a wide variety of topics, and it's my mission of spreading love to the world and self knowledge. I really go deep into science and technology and reaching human potential as well. I've been very fortunate to have many great guests on my show. I've interviewed Robert Kennedy Jr. I've interviewed a guy named David Icke. For those that are familiar with the conspiracy theory world, I interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, who is the inventor of the mRNA technology that's used in various vaccines and probably the most popular vaccine that's in the world today. Um, Tommy Chung, Dr. Peter McCullough. I mean, all these great people that have come on my show and provided the world with great information. In all facets of life. It's been an unbelievable ride. If someone would have told me a year or two before starting my podcast that I was going to be in a position to communicate to the world in this fashion, I would have called them a liar. But here I am. It's been a wonderful journey.
Great. Love to
Yeah,
hear it.
that's yeah, love to hear it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So tell me more about this book you've written.
Yeah, so like I said, it's what I like to call a template in regards to helping people um, deal with traumas they've experienced, and even writing the book, it was very helpful to me in regards to my healing process of working through everything that I've experienced in life. Just to take it back to 2020, I did something that I never thought I'd do, which was go skydiving, right? I jumped out of a plane at 15, 20,000 feet up in the air, but that was part of my healing process and teaching me how to control fear. I learned a lot about fear, which then pushed me forward to writing this book. But the book starts off with me being born. While my mom was pregnant with me, she had a vision, and this vision was her and my father riding in a hearse with my father driving, and then this black blob covered the vehicle. And so after my mom had that vision, she panicked. She said, "Oh my God, I'm going to have trouble with my pregnancy. I'm going to die during pregnancy." So fast forward a few months later to June 8th, 1978, which is when I was born during labor. She had a very, very difficult time giving birth. I was a pretty big baby. I was 9 pounds, 8 ounces, almost a 10-pound baby. So it wasn't easy for her. And then her
Wow.
doctor, yeah, her doctor had her do this maneuver, if you will, where she put her knees to her chest and then he made her rock back and forth, hoping to push me down through the birth canal. Well, unfortunately, when doing that, her uterus burst and she began to bleed out. And so her vision that she had prior to me being born in her mind was coming true. And she was laying on her back and there was a mirror above her and she saw all this blood and she panicked and the doctor panicked. The doctor then had to go get the head OBGYN at the hospital. Suffice to say, um, my mom survived. She didn't bleed completely out, but she lost a lot of blood. She had to have a couple blood transfusions. I was then taken to pediatrics ICU, and I didn't meet my mom until about a week later. So there wasn't that connection there that's necessary between mother and child right after a delivery. So I went to pediatrics. She went to the adult ICU. I met her. I don't know. It's like a week later, and then fast forward, I remember just having a pretty normal life up until about 4 years old when issues started to arise in my parents' marriage. And first thing I noticed, looking back on it, is my father he began drinking a lot. My mom was always the breadwinner, and I learned that had an effect upon him, amongst other things. He had some things that he had dealt with in his life that he never received healing from. He went to the Marines in the early 50s at the age of 16 and experienced a lot of racism and didn't know how to react to that. He had issues with his father where they fell out and they got into this big fight and they didn't communicate for almost 30 years. So that was something he always dealt with, that he never healed from. But I remember when I was about 5, 6 years old, my parents, my mom was at work and my father worked afternoons at General Motors. He left out for work. My brother and I were there. We were to stay home and by ourselves until my mom arrived a couple hours later. My father told us do not go outside. Well, I was 5, my brother was about 7. Being curious kids, we went outside in front of the house to play with our friends. As soon as he left, we were out there playing, and then we saw his car pull up, come down the street, and we said, "Oh no!" So we ran in the house, and he saw us, obviously. So when he got in the house, he pulled out this big belt. I don't know how old you guys are, but back in the day, they used to have these big, thick belts, probably about 4 to 5 inches thick, with these huge belt buckles. But because we were disobedient, he made us strip down to our trousers, and then began beating us. And this lasted for about 30 minutes. I remember at one point he took his belt, wrapped it around my brother's neck, and dragged him through the house. And when it was all said and done, we had these welts on us, these bruises on us, and just in bad shape. So that was the first form of trauma I remember.
You
And
you
then
said you said I'm sorry. You said all of that lasted 30 minutes.
yes, it was about 30 minutes, which obviously is a very long time, and
Oh
it seemed
my.
like
Yeah.
a lifetime to me. And he would beat us for about 10 minutes or so, take a break, yell at us, and then start beating us again, you know. And just it was
Yeah.
horrible, and then just really bad. And then fast forward I don't know, maybe about a year later, I then had this near death experience where I was sick, and my mom left out for work in the morning, and my father was there. And then she I remember her, I don't remember, but she told me that she came in my room, kissed me goodbye, and left out for work. And then she forgot something. She was gone about 15 minutes, and she came back. And I know it was something greater than myself that made her forget something and come back, because of how the story played out. But when she came back to the house, she checked on me. I was in my bed, and when she looked at me, I had turned purple and my eyes had rolled in the back of my head. And then she called out for my father. She said, "Jesse, Jesse, come look at Justin." So, suffice to say, they took me to the hospital. As soon as we walked into the emergency entrance, there was a short nurse there. She looked to be Filipino, my parents said, and she took a look at me and she said, "We must hurry. We must hurry. We have to get him to the back. I believe he has pneumonia and he's drowning." So they took me to the back. The surgeon then cut a hole in my side, stuck a tube up into my lungs, and drained all the water off of my lungs. And then the doctor told my parents that it was a blessing that things happened the way they did, because another 30 minutes to an hour, I wouldn't have made it. I had gotten that sick. So I took a turn for the worse very, very quickly. And then, after the surgery, my parents went around in the hospital looking for the nurse who met us at the door, and they described her to people they were looking for and told this hospital staff her name, and they all said nobody by that name works here. They said, no, there's no Filipino lady by the name of, I forgot what they said her name was. We'll just say Sue. She doesn't work here. So that was very interesting. And the way I see it, it was a guardian angel that was sent to help in that moment. And yeah, but thank God I made it through. And went through other abuse from my father as well. I remember one time when I was in middle school, about 12 years old or so, he left out for work. He was still working afternoons for General Motors at the time. He told me to make sure I take a shower, and I better have showered by the time I've gotten home. By the time he arrived home from work that night, it was summertime. Well, I was 11, 12 years old, playing with my friends, riding my bike. I didn't shower. He got home that night and asked me, did I take a shower? I said, no, Dad. So he then immediately punches me in my chest, grabs me by my shirt collar, takes me into the bathroom, and turns on the hot water and takes me by the neck and pushes my head underneath the running water in the sink. He was going to wash my hair. And then he took a vial of this hot oil treatment and boiled it on the stove. And then after a few minutes of it boiling, he went and got it and then poured that hot boiling oil all over my head. And while he held held me by the neck underneath the water, and I didn't want to cry because I wasn't allowed to cry. That's just how he raised me. You can't cry. You have to be a man, you know. And after he did that, I just fell to the ground in the bathroom, and I didn't cry. And then he said, "Now get your ass in the shower." And then he walked out, and then I got in the shower. And then once I got in the shower, then it just came out. I couldn't hold it any longer. I just cried and cried. But obviously, another traumatic experience that I had very, very, at least a second-degree burn on my head there, in the back of my head, and lost hair. The hair came out. There were other instances as well where I experienced a similar beating by the hands of my older brother, my brother and I, when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And, going through life, I then became a father at a young age at 19. But this time, my father was out of my life. And, I became a father at 19, and which is young, but it was perfect timing because, during that time of my life, I was in Michigan, in the Metro Detroit area where I grew up, and I was into some things that were not healthy for me. I was, running the streets, as they say, with the wrong crowd. I was into drinking and smoking a lot of marijuana and doing these things. But God sent my son in my life at the perfect time, because when he was born, that made me change. So my son grounded me, and I call my son to this day, I call him my saving grace, because that's what I needed. And that him being born allowed me to, at that point, change my life. And I always said that I was never going to treat him as my father treated me. I wasn't going to expose him to that type of verbal and physical abuse. So, I was, his mother and I, we didn't work out. We were together for a couple of years, but by the time he turned 5, I then became a single father. He came to live with me full time. So I raised him. And when I turned right around, I'd say when he was around 8 years old, that's when I met my current wife and got married about a year after dating. Her and I have been married now 15 years in May. And, I was always been this person who believed in God. My mom, she's actually a licensed evangelist. So when I was a little kid, I went to church 4 or 5 times a week. As I became older, though, I got away from the religion piece. In fact, to this day, I don't consider myself a religious person, more of a spiritual person. So I don't subscribe to any religion. And what I always tell people is that I feel closer to God today than ever before. So again, being on this journey throughout my life, experiencing different things, healing from all the trauma that I experienced as a child, and fast forward into 2020, I began a meditation called the Gateway Experience that was created by a person named Robert Malone back in the 70s. And the Gateway Experience it's a guided meditation that uses binaural beats, which is a hemisync meditation that sends two different beats into each ear. And once they get into the brain, if you will, it creates another beat. And what it does, it synchronizes the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And that puts you in a very deep, relaxed state, which then allows you to have out-of-body experiences. And this is all documented. And I say that because back in the late 70s, when Dr. Morrow was doing this, the U.S. Army got wind of what was going on. So they sent their officials there to see what he was doing. They then learned about it all, and they weaponized it to then begin spying on the Russians and the Chinese. And for people that are listening to this, you can find all this information online, specifically the CIA website. The documents were declassified about 10 years or so ago. So you can go on the CIA website and find all this information in regards to what the CIA and the Army was doing with this meditation. But anyway, I started doing this. I started having these out of body experiences where began going to the astral plane and seeing different entities and collecting information, which has allowed me to further heal in my life and um, just being guided by the spirit to write my book and start my podcast, and have come a long way to have an understanding about self. I used to always look for like an outside source or outside this, outside that for truth. But I have now come to realize that everything I need for everything in life comes from within. And so those are some of the things that I share in my book. It's been like this perfect journey, if you will, of challenges, of trauma, of love and grace. And, just thinking back on my father, everything that I experienced with him, I never held a grudge with him. I never, was mad at him for anything. The way I handled it all was with love. And that love comes from a source that is greater than myself. And, because of that, I've been able to do what I do at this point in my life. And my goal is now just to give back and to teach others how to do the same. So I have this book out, and I've also recently started an organization called Tangelic, where I help people, coach people, and help people how to overcome traumas and different challenging experiences in their life. So here I am today, doing my best to be a light to the world.
Wow. That, oh my gosh. I am absolutely speechless right now. What you've been through is, wow. I'm in absolute
Yeah.
shock, honestly. And
Yeah, I mean, things could definitely have gone a different way. I could have became a statistic, right? And I could have took that same negative energy that my father had in his life and took it and then passed it along to my family. But I made the decision to be a chain breaker, right? I didn't want to continue this intergenerational trauma that had not only my father had, but his father, his father's father. So I said, okay, it stops with me. I made that conscious decision to make life different for my lineage going forward.
I great, yes, absolutely. That was a smart move. And
Yeah.
I fully understand what you've been through. I was myself in that situation, in like internal family abuse. In fact,
Uh-huh.
the abuse I have been through in my life has gotten to the point I wanted to live with someone else that I not technically knew, but I knew from one of my mates who was like who had his older brother that's old enough to like live on his own. I've asked him to like live with him for a couple of years just because how that it was that bad with my family's abuse, but I lived there for
Hmm.
like 2 years in like somewhere in Merseyside, just like a couple miles down south from Liverpool. And then after a few years, I was like, I feel like going home now. I'm just a bit bored, whatever. Went home, nothing changed, but I mean, right now, my whole the abuse with my family has certainly died down. My parents are starting to like improve on their mistakes, but yeah, but back then, it was a bit shaky. But I fully understand what you've been through, Jesston, and
Yeah.
I am proud of the things you've done and what you're putting forward with your family. That I that is an achievement above anything else, in my opinion. I,
Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you. But
It's a
I tell
great
you what,
achievement.
I've done it, but I've had some help along the way, right? I must give credit to say, one person, definitely my wife. She's been rock solid in supporting me through this amazing journey. And, at least over the last 15, 16 years that her and I have been together. And I've become very familiar with the spirit as well, meaning God and the spirit that lives within, and the spirit of truth, the spirit of freedom, the spirit of liberation. These have all been tools that I have used to heal and to move forward, and to know that there is something greater in store for me. Even though I was a victim, I didn't have to keep that mentality that there is something greater, a purpose. We all have purpose. And that's something I've come to realize. And again, it's a spirit, and even even something that I experienced last year in April of 21. I had a experience, an ayahuasca experience, where I sat with ayahuasca for 3 nights in the desert here in Arizona. I had traveled to Tucson, and oh, I tell you what, that was life changing as well. I'm not sure if you two are familiar with ayahuasca, but um, it is something that reveals truth, and it takes you to the spiritual world. And I guess the best way for me to describe it is I literally walked with God for 3 nights in the desert, and I did this as well while fasting. And I don't recommend anyone just go take ayahuasca and fast for 3 nights. I began doing intermittent fasting in 2020, so my body was primed for that. But the spirit spoke on my way to Tucson and said, don't eat anything. And I went by myself. I had a hotel where I stayed during the day because I went to the ceremony site at night at about 7 p.m. and I was there till about 7 a.m. the next morning, and cut off my phone when I was at the hotel, turned off the TV. I didn't want any contact with the outside world. And I took a couple spiritual books with me, and I just read those books, and I prayed and meditated while at the hotel. And whew, I tell you what, that again, another life-changing experience for me. When I was told back in 2014 in San Diego that nothing is as it seems, that really came to light even more during that 3 nights in the desert. So it was something that needed to happen. So in 2020, between me starting the meditation, going skydiving, and doing fasting, which teaches you discipline and brings you closer to spirit, and then doing that ayahuasca ceremony in April of 21, a few months later, that really prepped me and primed me for what's to come. So, which was writing the book and starting my organization Tangelic, and you know I'm just looking forward to whatever else Spirit has in store for me here in later this year and beyond. But it's all about serving. It's all about helping, right? That's my main goal, and it's
Yeah,
done with love. It has to be done with love, So that's what I do.
yeah, that's great. Keep it up, my guy. You're doing an absolute splendid job.
Thank you. Will do.
Welcome. So, what else you got going for yourself throughout the rest of this week?
Well, for the rest of the week, I have a few interviews coming up. I'm on a couple other shows, if you will, podcasts, and I have my podcast interviews as well for my show. So just staying busy. I'm extremely busy between doing that and my family, etc. And have a actually yeah next week I go to a bookstore, local bookstore here in Phoenix for a book chat and book signing, and just staying busy. Telling people about truth and spreading the good word of and light. So have to stay busy. What's the saying? Idle hands is the devil's workshop. If I said that correct. So
Oh, that's great. Eric, is there anything you want to
Yeah.
ask Jesston?
Uh, hmm. I
Yeah,
really can't think of anything right
that's
now.
cool. That's cool. Um, do you have any pets?
I do not, but that will probably change soon. Maybe later this year. My daughter, who's 10 years old, she's been wanting to get a puppy, get a dog for for at least a year and a half now. And you know,
Oh,
I, I've always told her no because I didn't want to be the one to take care of a pet. Just because I'm so busy. But I think she's now at the age where she can do it and do it responsibly. So probably more than likely be getting her a dog a bit later this year.
Okay, okay. You got a question, Eric?
okay. Yeah, I just thought of one. Um, so you said you were, did you say earlier, like you said you were verbally abused too, right?
Yes.
And you said, did you say something about like that having you contemplate on things that you couldn't do before?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
had you contemplating a lot?
Right. 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 Absolutely. So the verbal abuse I went through. at the hands of my father. As I mentioned, his mantra was, "A child is to be seen and not heard." And I was never given the opportunity as a young child to express myself. And on top of that, him and my mom, they, obviously, had their issues, which eventually led to a divorce, and he had a lot of anger about that. And he used to always talk bad on my mom in the most disgusting ways. Again, my father was this Marine guy who had a potty mouth, as they say. And he used to always talk down on my mom. He used to always talk down on my brother and I. I always felt as if I wasn't good enough for him. You know, he wasn't
Oh,
supportive. He
okay.
wasn't a supportive father. etc. So
Okay.
All right. So I think my question is, how did you like your contemplation? How did you stop contemplating about a lot of stuff and and just do it? 'Cause I don't know. I do a lot of contemplating on like whether if I want to do this or that, and like just never do it.
well, the thing is, the I'd say the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that have helped me through that was my skydiving experience in 2020. The root base of how I felt was fear. The root base of a lot of
Mm.
negative energies and a lot of toxicity is simply fear. When you go through it and you pull back the layers, it's all rooted in fear. Okay, and that's why skydiving was so important to me, because again, a week leading up to the jump was probably the most challenging week of my life. And what I realized during that week, with all these crazy thoughts going through my head, well, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. What if the parachute doesn't open? Then something happens, and then my wife will be a widow, and my kids won't have a father, and all these other things. I had to realize that it wasn't my time. I had to realize, I came to a realization that, you know, I have to, if I'm going to do this and do this successfully, I have to bring about some form of peace to myself. And, that wasn't easy. So, with that being said, I also realized that fear is what I call a bully, because it's just constantly messing with you. It constantly wants you to think a certain way. But I realized not only is fear a bully, but fear has a fear itself. And fear's fear is thinking or knowing that it's a possibility that you won't fear it anymore. So that's fear's biggest fear. And then once I realized that, that clicked. Something just like the light bulb went off, and I just viewed fear differently. I said, fear is this bully that its biggest fear is not being able to make me fear. And then I realized that any type of issue that I have in my life, any type of low vibration, anything that bothers me, I must go through it and not avoid it. And doing that through skydiving and other things, I then realized that God truly places the very best things in life on the other side of that, meaning the other side of fear. So if people can get to the point where they step outside of all the what ifs, but and the buts and the what ifs, and stop questioning things and just deal with whatever it is that keeps them in that low vibrating fear state, it's almost like a universal law, right? There's something great for you on the other side of that. So you just really have to take it head on. And you have to find something, like I did, with the realization that fear is a bully and it fears itself. At that point, I had no respect for fear, because all my life I had this respect for fear. And, if you will, this respect where, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that because of this, because of that. And with the realization that fear is a bully and it fears itself, I said, oh my God, this fear thing is weak. And that gave
Mm-hmm.
me the strength to then go forward and take things head on. And I tell you guys what, once I've learned that, and it's been about 2 years now, I feel like it's nothing I can't do. And I don't say that in a cocky way, right? But after going skydiving and dealing with fear, and then also going through that ayahuasca experience, which was probably one of the most challenging things I have ever done in life, I feel like there's nothing I can't do, which has brought along this sense of freedom, right? This sense of liberation, this sense of justice. And I've just, I've stepped outside, and I've gotten comfortable being uncomfortable, which is something I needed to learn how to do. I was this introvert guy all of my life, so me writing a book or even doing a podcast, it's literally unbelievable to me. And I'm just so thankful. I have so much gratitude in my heart for these changes that I've been able to make. And the beautiful thing about it is
Okay.
anyone can do it. We all can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
And that is all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Jesston, talking about your podcast, your book, and your very motivational story, your life story. It's very, very touching.
Yeah, it
and thank you
was.
guys so much for having me. I'm honored to be able to be on your show. It's definitely great connecting with you and your audience. And as you mentioned at the beginning, I have the Hidden Gateway podcast. I have a YouTube channel, Instagram. I'm on all the social media platforms. The in all the podcast streaming platforms. You can, if anyone's interested in the book as well, you can buy it on Amazon for $11.99. I think a lot of people will find it very interesting.
Great. And until next time, stay tuned for more.